Hey everyone, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate 5 demo for the piece I call Squall Leonhart. This one is simple, but it requires a little bit of a backstory, and that is, this here is a piece I did a long time ago of Squall Leonhart, where I wanted to try and emphasize his sort of like angsty teenager side, and people were pretty unhappy with this, to be honest. The whole thing was just supposed to be a joke. I like Final Fantasy VIII, but yeah, people took it pretty seriously. So I thought it'd be fun the other day when I was doodling to just kind of do a new take on Squall, new meaning draw it again myself, and see where it kind of takes me. It up as a digital watercolor, where I use the watercolor brush that's in my brush set, which is down below. It's really basic. Don't look for a lot of advanced aspects to that brush. It's just supposed to be kind of like a starter watercolor brush that you can use with some other techniques to really kind of amp it up. One of the things I want you to look for when you're watching this video, though, is that some of the main takeaways on how to make something look watercolor is mimicking things that are in a watercolor piece. Be working digitally, but you want to try and bring aspects in, even if you have to force it, to try and make it look a little bit more like a watercolor. So as it pans across here, you can see there's a texture, you can see the underdrawing, there's some messiness to it. Obviously watercolors don't have to be messy, but a lot of people embrace that aspect of them, and so those are kind of the things we're going to be working on as we go through it. Now this video overall is quick because this was a very fast piece, but I think that there's still some stuff to learn here. Now, I've done watercolors before on this channel. If you go way far back to like my Pomus Mit Mayo piece, which is like at the very beginning of the channel, that one is like a digital watercolor, and there's others as well. I don't go too crazy hardcore into trying to sell every aspect of a watercolor here, because from start to finish, this piece was only about an hour's worth of work. It was a very quick one that I just kind of did on a Sunday after doing a bunch of rendered stuff, and I wanted to do something a little bit simpler. So you can see here from the rough sketch, I actually decided to draw Squall from the very beginning. I'm in the process of playing through Final Fantasy VIII again. My son, particularly my older son, although both of them kind of like the games, but my older son is obsessed with Final Fantasy in general. So we're kind of going through them slowly but surely. So right now we're on Final Fantasy VIII with the HD release. That's the one that we're playing through. And I thought to myself, it'd be fun to do like a badass Squall. We've seen a take like this before in the past, meaning somebody doing kind of a slightly more, well, I shouldn't say that I was going for badass. I was just going for shapes that were maybe a little bit stronger than what Squall is normally known for. And you've seen, I think, some things similar to this just in general across the internet, but like one of the ones that really strikes me as like memorable was back when Joe Madureira and I think Christian Lichtner did the covers, if I'm not mistaken. I'm like 99% sure. When they did the Final Fantasy X cover for PlayStation Magazine way back when, and like Tidus was all crazy buff, and Yuna was looking all like more baby than like babish. I mean like babe-y, not like a baby. More like a babe than or comic book babe than like a than kind of her personality and the way she's portrayed in the game. And particularly that Tidus was like crazy jacked. So in some ways I was kind of thinking of that. I wasn't thinking directly of that. I was thinking more in the same thought process. Really the thing that was kind of more in my mind was just a little bit more of like a romancy, idealized version of Squall, as opposed to the really young teen looking. So you could almost argue that this is like Squall age 35 or something like that. In fact, I think I saw some people even comment to that effect on Instagram, that it wasn't like teen Squall, it was like older Squall. So I was definitely, you can tell by the way that I'm kind of accenting certain features, going for a little bit of the rugged pretty boy kind of vibe here. And so once I had the idea down and I was moving into the lines, I wasn't being too clean with them. I wasn't being too precise. I wanted them to also feel a little bit like pencil. Now in the past, I've done that by actually making the pencil a little bit fatter than normal and not really building the lines, just fully embracing the fact that it, like almost like you're not turning or angling your pencil at all. It's just like a straight, I pulled this line, next I pull this line. Sometimes I can really give it like this handcrafted watercolory vibe, but for this I did want it to be a little bit more refined than that. So that's what we've got going on here. In a second, we switch into the watercolor. So this is now, I've got the rough drawing underneath, which I switched to blue. I drew it in black, but I wanted it to be blue, so it felt kind of like that's how I would have done it in a sketchbook. And then we do the black line, and now we're into the watercolor, which is just getting blobbed on, blah, 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 because I want to try and get some of those natural aspects that you're seeing like towards the top of his hair, and the fact that his skin goes from like more opaque to more transparent. But then I go back in and clean it up a little bit because I want some amount of messiness and chaos, but not all of it. If this were a real watercolor brush, you'd be able to actually, you know, turn the brush and use the shape of its actual brush to kind of like do what you wanted to do and get into some of these cracks. You could also use other techniques as well, but that's kind of what I'm getting out of it by making it a different step, where it's like it's on its own layer. I just put it everywhere and then I clean it up afterwards. Same thing is true, of course, with basically every aspect of this. I put it on kind of heavy and I try to get the most watercolory vibe out of it I can, and then I clean it up a little bit afterwards. Now, how do you get that look? Well, you do it kind of with this particular brush by putting it down heavy and not lifting your pencil, and you just kind of go back and forth a little bit and you'll see it kind of smudge out but then fade away, and then you do it again and you do it again. You kind of layer it that way, or at least that's how I did it. Occasionally I would switch to eraser and use the watercolor brush as an eraser, but that was really only in like one or two spots. That wasn't the main way of getting this look. There's some amount of the transparencies too that you embrace and you try to get them to kind of intermingle. Now I'm not going for, as I said, I'm not painstakingly making this look watercolory in this particular piece. I have done that in the past. I have really tried, like if you go way back in my DeviantArt, I took like a Joe Madureira, speaking of Joe Madureira, I took a Joe Madureira line art of Red Monica and I did a digital watercolor over it at the time. This was a long time ago and it was in Photoshop. And that one was more about really trying to nail the look. This is much more about just, you know, trying to do a lighter approach to coloring this at the time. So you can see there's a lot of kind of messiness happening in here while I'm just trying to get everything to like work nicely and feel organic, messy, like it's watercolor. Now, one of the most important aspects of really selling the watercolor is the texture. It's also blurring and smearing some parts of the lines where maybe you accidentally got too much water or you kind of messed with the lines a little bit too much. And then sometimes even adding some damage like that water that you're seeing in the top right can really help sell something. Remember, when it's in a more natural medium, you want to bring in aspects that are more natural, and sometimes that means like mistakes and things like that. So this here is the final version of the image. Let's take a second to actually do a Procreate file deep dive real fast so you can see what's going on with the file, and I can just quickly show you what that technique is like with laying down the watercolor brush. We're going to do this really quickly. I just want to run down the layers so you can see how messy this actually is. At the very top we have these extra touches. We'll turn those off for now. This, you can see, is all of the line work. And then this is an extra layer that I used, almost like a flat, like when I would merge all of my flats and other pieces. And then this here is him. This is the extra tweaks and stuff. This is the background. And then this is an extra copy of the lines right here. And then the actual backdrop. So you can see the actual backdrop color is this sort of like yellow. Let's look at, I'm going to delete this for now because we don't really need it for the purposes of this demo. Let's just look at each individual situation. So this here is the background. You can see with this layer here that some of that darkening in the background actually makes its way into the skin due to the transparency. We have this kind of merged up background, just trying to kind of, I used it at one point, it was kind of brown in the piece, and then I merged it and color shifted it to get it to something that I like better. I originally wanted it to kind of echo the sky from the like Assault on, is that Assault on Galbadia? I can't remember now. My brain is fried with all of the location names in that game. But anyways, that's that. And then here are the flats for him. Honestly, I think that they need the context of the lines in order to make a lot of sense. So let's look at the lines first. What we have here is a duplication of the lines that are slightly blurred. Then here we have the lines themselves, just drawn with the fat pencil, which is in the same brush pack. And then we have This is, yeah, this is just extra lines, so we don't need that for this demo. This here is some white to kind of like knock back the blue down here, and then also that is where the drip is from in the top. Here's some more where we're just knocking back like the lines and the colors, because the colors will go underneath that, of course. We've got the blue lines right here, which have a reduced opacity. You can see right there. And then there's a duplication of them that is blurred. And this is all just to try and soften those lines and give them a little bit of a feel like water has been around and there is some sort of bleed happening. If I wanted to get like really crazy about it, I would actually go like I did here. See how there's actual blur there? That's just me using the smudge tool and actually pulling some blurs here or there, like right there you can see. And I would actually sometimes even take water and have it drip down and have it damage the paint and then smear it there as well. Okay, so now that that's all there, we can actually look at the flats a little bit better. You can see how the flats are laid in. It's very messy compared to what I normally do, but I think you can also see that there are similarities to how I'm handling this as to how I would handle any painting, really. Here you can see, for instance, the scar is just like a bright red, but it's had its opacity lowered, because by doing a lot of that, where you're doing like a full opacity color and then lowering the opacity, you're automatically bringing two colors together, and so it starts creating a little bit of a unification. Now you don't want to do that as just by saying, hey, I've done that, so now it's good, but that is a way to start getting some of the colors all intermingling and having it feel like it's more unified. In fact, one thing that you could do is you could even flatten this whole thing and then lower its opacity. See how, I mean, it's going to almost like nothing, right? But you can see by how doing that, you're bringing all of those colors closer together because they're getting more transparent and whatever's behind is showing through. So that's actually a technique you could use if you wanted to try and harmonize things. Let's unmerge that. Okay, and then lastly we have, or I shouldn't say lastly of the sort of main stacks, we have this, which if you follow other videos, it's very similar. I mean, there's a multiply layer here that's a pale blue, and then there's another multiply here. In fact, is that just duplicated? Oh no, that's a bit of a bleed. That's just me selecting the inverse and encroaching upon it. And then here is a little bit of a hot edge, which is being put in a little bit more haphazardly, and I'm letting these colors intermingle so that it looks a little bit more like paint. Though, of course, like I said, not painstakingly so, just in order to get the job done and have it feel that way, especially when you're scrolling through something like Instagram, you're just looking at it at that size, right? Here's just a little bit of bounces. I didn't go too crazy with the bounce, but I wanted it a little bit in there. Now you can also see these aspects are a little smooth, like they are a little nice, like a little too nice. Oh, and then here's just some extra iris detail. So when we jump all the way up to here and we turn this on, let's zoom in here, we're going to get this texture, which does a lot to add to the vibe of everything. On top of that texture, we have the whites, because the idea here is that you went in with like a paint pen or white paint and you added these highlights on top. So there is a highlight with a drop shadow underneath, just to kind of make them lift off the page a little bit more if you were looking at it close up. So the idea here now is what we've sort of tried to capture is a pencil drawing with watercolor, and then and that's all kind of soaking into the paper and becoming part of the paper, but then sitting on top is that white paint there. Real quick, I'm just going to turn all of this off, and we're going to look at the watercolor and how it works. I'll just grab some sort of a nice pleasing sort of green here. What am I using these days? Here we go. So this is the watercolor brush that's in my brush pack. I haven't used it that much since I made the brush pack, but I just kind of wanted to show it to you. So now I'm not going to lift my pencil up. I'm going to make it full size, which isn't that big, to be honest. I'm just going to stroke back and forth as I drag it across, and you can watch it fall off. See how fast that falls off? And actually, I'm going to grab this too, because I think this will help with the vibe. Yeah, there we go. So you can see kind of what that looks like there. So again, if I go like this, and it trails off really quickly. So if I go a little bit faster this direction, I can pull it a little bit further. And if I keep working it, you can see it all will blend itself a little bit by not lifting up. So in order to get something that looks kind of nice, I might go like this and lift up and put back down, lift up, put back down, do it again, and then maybe come back here and smear that whole thing out without lifting it up on that last one. Do it again like this, and you get that. If I use something that's maybe a little bit darker, maybe we can also see here, you can see a little bit more of the wet edges and how much that is important to getting the feel of it as well. And you can see when these start merging together and blending together, obviously it's not like real watercolor in the sense that you can then continue to you can sort of smudge it more than you would be able to with real watercolor. Obviously there would be this kind of blending with real watercolor, but you can see if I don't lift up my brush, it can continue to drag the stuff around, and it really wouldn't do that. But it's really nice for a quick hit on watercolor brushes. Just a quick, this'll work for you. So give it a shot. It's in the free pack that's down below. There are other people out there who've made, of course, far crazier packs. So you can always go check those out and sort of see for yourself what you like out of the different brush packs and everything. But I think that this is like a pretty good starter, and it can start answering the question like what you might want and what you might not want out of a watercolor brush. So this was the super rough that I did at the very beginning to just kind of figure out what this was going to be. Here are the clean lines with some of the blue lines underneath and the background a little yellowed. And then the final piece, here you go, all finished. Squall is complete. So thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this quick video, please consider hitting like or subscribing, and I will see you on the next one. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.